Okay, boom, we're off and running. Hey, everybody, thank you for listening to another experience of me and Paranormal You. This is Ryan Singer. I'm very happy to be joined today by Narayana Mantufar. Um, we were connected through a mutual friend, Renee Watt, and who I've known for quite a long time, who messaged me. Something that always gets my attention immediately is the word shapeshifter. And I have experience that what kind of catapulted me into the paranormal world and my interest in a deep way, as opposed to just being kind of interested in a cursory fashion, was my experiences with a woman I dated many years ago who experienced physical shapeshifting, and a couple different times I was, I guess privileged enough to be able to witness it. One time freaked out, another time I was ready for it the second time. But so we've got a lot to cover today. Potentially, I don't think we're going to get to nearly even half of it. Um, because I mean, one of the things that really stands out about your bio too is I love the birth date. If we can mention 11/11 as the birthday, born in Mexico City on 11/11. I love that from the bio. Uh, and you can go to naraman.com, which we'll link in the show notes and everything for everybody to check out because there's lots of information to dig into. Thanks for joining me today.
Of course, yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I mean, there's a giant journey that happens here, seemingly from when I'm able to glean from the website and from our brief conversation previously, uh, when we were setting up the interview. There's a big journey, a spiritual journey specifically, but there also seem to be physical journeys. Especially, I don't know how much traveling, in the physical realm that you're doing. Um, I mean, all of us have been kind of handcuffed in many regards in the last year and a half, but the it seems like your spiritual journey is probably, now this is a total guess on my part, leading to at least a future of a lot more physical traveling. And that's if you weren't already like traveling a lot beforehand. Do you seem to get the sense that your traveling is going to be like really increasing coming in the near future?
Yes, I mean, I am a person that really feeds from traveling in general. Um, I mean, I was hiding it for a little while because I didn't want people to judge me or whatever, or think that I didn't care. But I've been traveling for the last, you know, 8 months. Because I mean, I already had COVID and it wasn't planned, but here I am. I found myself leaving my home and looking for new experiences, and then there I was out in the world, and it was a little scary at first, but I've actually realized that. I mean, I've always known that I like to travel, but I've never been traveling this long. So I've been without a home for almost a year now, and it feels really liberating, to be honest. I've been really thinking about how has that changed my perspective of living, and how come I don't want to have stuff. I'm actually quite comfortable living out of my suitcases at this point. So even though I am planning to go back to the US because of my job and other things, I do plan on living again and just living the nomadic life because that's where I'm at my best. That's the
Yeah,
truth.
I can totally relate to that. Doing stand-up comedy for the last 18 years and then kind of full-time traveling for about the last 10. I used to live by the motto like if I can't fit it in my car, I don't need it. And uh so I do love the road. I love all the mythology and the folklore and all the things that come with being a traveler and being out on the road, and I definitely can relate to that. And I think it was September of last year, the first time I was like, I have to get out of Los Angeles. And So I went back and traveled, drove across the country, and spent some time in the Midwest, and was in Alabama for a minute, walking through a house with a realtor. Like, I was like, am I buying a house in this cool little town right now? And then, so I do need the travel to feel alive, a large part of me.
Mhm.
So I definitely can relate to that. The changing perspective, I think, is interesting too, because um, and I struggle to really not come off as like thinking I'm better than in certain ways. Like it's just different. Like when I compare like my perspective with people I grew up with who never left my hometown in Ohio, we think about things differently. We have different perspectives because and it's a result of me traveling everywhere, and it's a result of them, you know being a parent, having children that they keep alive, and raise to become productive, happy, healthy human beings, right? Something that I totally am void of. I have no idea what that experience is like as well. So I don't want people to think that I think I'm better because I've traveled everywhere and have different experiences. It's just different, right? And we never know until we are subjected to these experiences, right? And I think the traveling experience is one of those.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Mexico in a pretty conservative family, so like I wasn't exposed to traveling when I was a kid, and I remember that depressed me. Um, because in my chart I have a very focused energy on Sagittarius, which is the traveling sign. So I remember when I first got on a plane, I remember that just joy of like, I'm going somewhere, and it's amazing. And the first time I left Mexico was like I could actually feel myself alive, and true, like I also knew that parenting was not going to be part of my journey. It's something I decided um, a long time ago. And so that has allowed me to like be a little bit more mobile, but we're all in a different journey. So that's what I see in my work. Often, we're not all supposed to be like, you know, singing the same song or
Yeah, that'd be
dancing to
pretty
the rhythm
boring,
of their
wouldn't
own
it?
drum. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So
yeah.
that's
We
my
should,
journey. So
yeah, we should talk about the job a little bit. I think probably too, just to let everybody have some insight into, maybe some of the topics that are going to be coming in, because you casually mentioned your chart here, and I think anybody who listens to this program, they understand what that means. I mean, they realize you're talking about, we're in the world of astrology, and we're talking about birth charts and alignments and all these kinds of things, and the how about you do a better job of explaining it than I would. So tell us what kind of like the main gig for you right now is.
yeah, and you're right. I have a lot of gigs, but my 9 to 5 job is I work for astrology.com and horoscope.com. So I started my job there 10 years ago. Well, it will be 10 years in October, which seems like a lifetime.
Oh wow.
I started out as an editor because that's how I started my career in media, as a Spanish editor. And then I progressively, changed jobs, and I was managing editor, I was like senior editor and all this. But because what we do is astrology and horoscopes, I slowly started getting interested in astrology and going to school on the weekends. And that pretty much changed my life. So I that's where I really began finding myself. It took me a little while to figure out what my mission in life was until I started studying astrology, and everything just seemed so clear to me. Like right from the get-go, it also seemed like it was coming from a past life. It was just weird how I would just soak in everything so quickly, and just, I'm like, I've done this before. I know it. Everything just seems like I've known it, like like this lifetime, it's just a refresher of the past. And I believe in reincarnation. So I became the senior astrologer a few years back, and so that's what I do. I create content. I hire a lot of talented astrologers, writers, tarot readers, psychics to create content for our websites, and then I produce the content. So it's mostly in written form, but I also get my hands wet in everything because it's a small company. So I produce premium content, video content, social media content, and sometimes I just write it myself because I'm also a writer, obviously. I just finished my first book, which is coming up in October, and I'm really excited about.
Well, congratulations. What's tease us the name? What's the book?
Yeah, it's called Moon Signs, Unlock Your Inner Luminary Power. So it's based on the moon, on the natal moon, on the natal moon phase, sign, and aspect for every person. But it also links because, like, we're evolving as humans. Obviously, you don't have the same emotional needs that you had when you were 15 or even like 2 years ago. So it helps people track that journey, which is the emotional journey. In astrology, the moon is just as important as the sun, sometimes even more. So my book is about that because for me it was just a very mind-blowing experience when I started working with my moon. And so yes, I mean I'm thinking about my second book already, but I'm kind of busy. I'm also a visual artist and an editor, so I keep busy. I like
Yeah, it sounds
yes.
like it.
Yeah, I also write for House of Intuition in LA. Actually, I don't know if you know that store.
Oh yeah, I love that store. They got multiple
Yes.
locations out here.
Yeah, yeah. So I just started contributing there. I'm like doing IG lives. I'm writing weekly forecasts and blogging and also teaching astrology because it wasn't the plan, but they asked me to do it, and it's funny because I got a tarot reading at the beginning on my birthday in November, and my tarot reading, it came out. It was like, "Are you interested in teaching?" I was like, "Well, I haven't really thought about it," and here I am. So it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it is funny too. I want to go back to like there's just a funny visual to me too when it comes to, you hire all these talented people that are in this world, right? And it it's like the exact kind of job interview that I imagine, like it's like the melting of these two magical worlds, right? Like I just imagine it's like this real kind of like Harry Potter scene, like when you're interviewing, like for people listening, like can you imagine like going to that interview? It's like so different than say, like where do you see yourself in 5 years with this company selling our hoses for vacuum cleaners, right? But it still has to kind of fit into this, materialistic world that, this modern world that we live in, right? For everybody.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty interesting because right from the get-go you're talking another language, and you're trying to like um, grasp at like their personality, if they're actually going to deliver, because I have had some people telling me, I'm not going to sign the contract because Mercury is retrograde, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I just have to say, like, look, I have a boss, I have a CEO, I have to like, so I mean, of course, I try to work with them and all that, um, but sometimes you just have to keep the wheels moving, and sometimes you make mistakes, and have to redo things. And but yeah, I mean, I must say that I feel pretty lucky to be working with some of the most talented people in the spiritual industry and the creative industry. So that has been also been very rewarding. A lot of them have become my friends. Um, so it's pretty amazing to just be like so exposed to so much creativity and different ways of living.
For sure. And I think my partner and I, we signed the lease right before on our new apartment, right before there was a Mercury in retrograde happening. And I think we got in right before right under the wire, which I was happy about. Because I was like, I mean, this could end up being like the apartment from hell if we end up, but it's like, but then sometimes I tell some people, like some friends of mine, I'm like, I, I love all of this. And it's so deep, and there's so many layers to a person's chart. And like the nodes and the moon, and and I've like started to embrace my moon because I'm a Cancer, but I'm a Sag moon, so it's like I'm starting to
Mm,
understand what that means, right? and and my girlfriend is an Earth sign, and like I find like really helps ground me in our
right.
relationship, right?
Mm,
And we just moved closer to the beach, and I'm like, I need the water right now as this water sign. Like this is the part of my life where I'm like fully embracing like my crab, and so and but then at the same time I'm like, I'm not going to be a prisoner to my chart, is what I'll sometimes say, because I think sometimes we can go to, I know I take things too far sometimes. Like I'll get so into something that I can go too far, and it will limit my perspective a little bit, or it'll start closing off the possibilities. I'll start closing myself off to the possibilities of other things, because I think a lot of people, when they grow up and they hear about tarot card readings and psychics and astrology, they think, okay, so I'm going to go see an astrologer, and they're going to tell me the name of the person I'm meeting on the day I'm meeting them, where I'm meeting them, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. Like, like the specificity that we think comes with all of this stuff, um, as opposed to like, this is the possible future you're looking at, depending on some of the choices you may make, right? And so moving away from that specificity and being locked into like, this is the way something has to happen, uh, is is kind of like an outdated point of view of the way psychics in general work, I think.
yeah, I mean, which by the way, when you say that you have a tendency to overdo things, that's when the Sag moon kicks in. But because it's like Sag is like, I want to do it all.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yes, I mean, there's a huge misconception about what all of this stuff is, like, um, and I think that when I started working in this field, it was it was still kind of taboo, and like people were like confused, or like didn't know what to say, or like, and I still get like, how did you end up doing this? But now, as astrology and tarot, I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, even the New York Times is writing about this. So because as consciousness becomes, more and more and more important in mainstream, um, there are all these misconceptions about what psychic energy is, what astrology is. I mean, what I tell my clients right from the get-go is, if they want to know, like, of course you can figure out when you're going to get married. It takes a full-on couple of hours to figure it out, because it's actually pretty um, it's something very specific. You can figure it out. But what it is that astrology is not to figure out the future. You make the future. The future is not there yet. You're supposed to create it for yourself and manifest it. What astrology is a map, is a guide, you know, of of your complex personality. There are so many, like you were saying, so many layers, so many parts, past lives, your soul's purpose, in which we're here to guide you, but you make your own future. You're given certain tools to work with your life, let's say this way. And you decide how to use the tools. You can use it in incredible ways, or you can misuse them. But it is up to you to use what you came with to this lifetime, and forge your own future. And for example, psychics, they will tell you, I mean, the ones that are good, they will tell you something similar that applies to them. And like, tarot goes through your subconscious mind, So it's not like we're guessing the future. I mean, we're like reading different languages, but it's not like we're giving our power to this, any of these practices. They're tools that we can use to better our lives. And when people operate from that perspective, it's when everything changes and just becomes uh, clearer, right? So
Yeah, it's a beautiful way of saying it. The the tools, the toolboxes that we have, and to help guide us through this, this mystery of existence, and trying to figure out like, how exactly is this consciousness inhabiting this physical form that I've got, and we're looking for the answers of like what, and then there's the bigger questions too that you can dive into with like, like the why of it all. And I love the idea too of the past lives being accessible. I'm pretty, well, I'm not pretty on board. I'm totally on board with the idea of reincarnation. And um I'm, this is a weird question maybe, but it's kind of, I don't know if you'll see it coming, but the idea that we could be living simultaneous lives at once. That, and there's a couple like these past life books, like the Life in Between Lives by Dr. Michael Newton, and um, you know, Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss, that I really enjoy those books. And I believe it was Many Lives, Many, or no, Life Between Lives, where they talked about the splitting of a soul or consciousness into separate human lives at the same time, to be kind of like trying to supercharge, like the student who takes a lot of extra classes or goes to summer school to load up to try to graduate early, right? The idea that you can split into two different people simultaneously at the same time to try to learn these extra lessons to move up faster. Um, have you had direct, like, have you been past life hypnotized or just had readings done from people or gone to readers? How deep have you gotten into your own past lives? Because you referenced it a little bit earlier.
To be quite honest, I mean, I've studied a little bit, like the splitting. It reminds me of the concept of like twin flames, you
Mm.
know. Um, but from, because like your spirit, yeah, which people often confuse it with like soulmate, which are two different things. Like soulmates are, there's not one, they can be many, and they're not necessarily like forever living, happily ever after. The twin flame reminds me of that splitting of the spirit, because um, there's that experience of like really intense kind of being the same person, um, but not necessarily good for each other kind of situation. I've explored that. In past lives, I have not gotten hypnotized yet. I feel really, really inclined to it, but there's something in my chart that says that I'm not supposed to, because I'm a very psychic and very sensitive person. So, I mean, part of my journey has been learning how to protect my energy, which that's why I went to psychic school for mainly. How to protect my energy in the corporate world, how to protect my energy around just people, or even just giving readings, because like, since I do a lot of readings, you listen to a lot of intense things, you can absorb that. So I had to learn how to protect myself from that. But I mean, from the astrology perspective of the type of astrology that I practice, it's like this life, it's part of your soul's journey. It's not like the journey begins when you're born and it ends when you die. Like, there are certain, the notes, for example, since you mentioned them, the notes speak a lot of where we've been and where we're going, and how we're doing that, what we learned in past lives, what we've repeated over and over and over again, and how we're not supposed to do that in order to move into our destiny in the sense where I already spoke to how I believe in it, your soul's destiny, not that it's been written. Um, and I do believe in it because I feel it, and I see it in people, like how long, the term old soul, I don't think it comes out of nowhere. I've read for people who are definitely way ahead in their soul's journey. Like, it's very obvious, they're very clear about what they're doing. And some other people are just beginning their journey. And like, there are many different ways in which you can read that in a chart, which is like pretty cool. Sometimes you can even tell how the person died before, and they will tell you, I have this trauma about this, and then it's very clear why that is in the chart. It's just it's very trippy. But I think it's just a fascinating subject. And I mean, I have been exposed to a lot of different energies that are hard to explain in the physical, you know, in the physical plane. Like, only the spiritual plane can explain how some of the things that I've seen happen. Um,
Yeah, and
so
I want to get into some of that too, because obviously we teased it at the beginning, and I think it's also it's always interesting to me when it comes to, like you said, like the old soul, or maybe they're someone's a more fresh journey, like they're at maybe the more beginning stages. And to me, both are equally exciting. Depending, from, because they both have their very exciting elements to it. But I always feel like there's something either that's just kind of like pre-programmed in, and someone's kind of like that old soul like you're talking about, or there is some kind of profound, or it just never goes away as an interest, as like maybe when we're younger, that kind of really sparks, that starts the fire for us in being interested and fascinated in something, especially in this world. And I'm curious if you were just out of the gate, just always kind of, and I say this in the most loving, beautiful way possible, like always a weirdo, and into that stuff, or if there was, or were there events that kind of just kept happening, and then you just had to keep listening and following these breadcrumbs that were being laid out for you?
I was always a weirdo, and total, absolutely. And that's why astrology was really healing for me, because coming from a Mexican family that was like Catholic, or and very overprotective of me, um, I never felt like I would fit in, to be totally honest. And I always had these like interest in the occult, and I always explored these subjects because they fascinated me. I'm a Scorpio, but I also have this like huge Plutonian energy in my chart. So like, I was always interested in ghosts. I was always interested in like anything that was paranormal because it just fascinated me. And it's really funny because I didn't started experiencing it like that like clear until semi recently. So I didn't actually, for example, my husband like grew up with a ghost. I didn't have that experience. He remembers the ghost perfectly. It's like the first thing that he remembers about being a baby. I didn't have any of that. For me, it's been more like around this age that everything's just kind of like making itself more obvious. But in a way, I always knew it was there, because I'm very sensitive and to the energies. I've definitely traveled in my dreams, or had experiences in which like I felt spirits coming around. Um, so like I've always been just fascinated by this because I just in some way or another knew it existed, and then it's just been getting reaffirmed lately, which is like really interesting. But I was always a weirdo, and I was always like super interested. Um, but having real experiences like has kind of changed me, because like, to be honest, I didn't really expect seeing a ghost to be as scary as it was. Actually, I would always kind of wanted to have that experience. I was like, oh, but each experience is different. So it has nothing to do with like being it good or bad. It's just like it is. You know.
Now, was the ghost experience? I guess we can talk about that too. The Was it something you were you doing like I'll go and do paranormal investigations where we're very specifically looking to try to
Mm.
see a ghost or contact in some form. Was this a situation where was this a seance? Was it a very specific with the intention of contacting a ghost, or did it just happen?
No, it was totally not intentional. Um, and I wasn't alone. I was never alone when it happened. There were other people around, and it was pretty scary, to be honest. It's probably been the scariest experience of my life, because it happened. So when I was in college, um, it was an old hacienda. So I went to school in Mexico, and the campus was in an old hacienda. And our dorm was built on, what I know, it sounds really like, you know, like out of a movie, but it is true. Like, it was built on the cemetery of the old hacienda. And it was a bunch of girls living in this dorm, and it's like, we actually came back from the club that night, and we were eating, we're like, oh, we've been out and we're going to eat something. And this ghost started showing up. So I was never alone when this happened. I have witnesses. And also, I did start getting really scared, because this ghost was terrorizing us for like a week. He kept coming back, moving stuff, shaking like furniture, and I started realizing that everything that this ghost was moving belonged to me.
Hmm.
So while there were other people there, and that first time was like so scary, and we like left the dorm and we're like screamed and yelled, and so everyone was like, what's going on? um all the other girls on the other dorm were like, oh, you girls were drunk. It was like 2:30 in the morning. But then it kept continuously happening. um I left that dorm, by the way, because I was so terrorized. It didn't happen right away, but uh in a few months, I ended up leaving, because I just kind of got, so I know it was not a nice ghost, because like I've heard of stories of nice ghosts, like the one that my husband knew when he was a kid. But this ghost was not friendly. So it was actually pretty traumatizing for me, because it seemed like it was coming at me, because everything that this ghost was touching and moving in front of us was mine. So it was just like, oh my God, I have to get out of here. And my mom wouldn't believe me. She still thinks I made that story up so she would take me out of the dorms.
Hmm.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, it is funny, and I guess it makes sense to me that you're saying that it felt like it was, specifically like being directed at you. I mean, because how would something communicate, specifically to someone if it wasn't speaking, right? You have to find some kind of way to get your message across. That's what all communication, regardless of whether there's language barriers and there's certain things that always will be able to jump over any language barrier between any group of people, whether, and even between like human and dog, right? Like, or, dog and cat. There's certain things that, okay, this message is being received and the intent of this message is clear, even though we don't speak quote unquote the same language, right? Like
Right.
showing your teeth between different species of animals lets the other animal know exactly what the other one's thinking, right? So when you have like an entity that is not the same physical form as human being, and maybe it wasn't even human, who knows what this ghost was. um it's like it's directing it at you. It's like you're going to get my message one way or the other. And so I don't blame you for wanting to get out of there. I have never seen an apparition. um and I've never had like what I would consider to be like a high level intensity ghost experience that really rattled me in a negative way.
Mhm.
I've had EVPs or communication through like speakers and spirit boxes, I believe, and Ouija boards, but nothing that was ever like, oh, I am scared. And quite frankly, I don't want that.
Yeah, you don't want that. You don't want that. And like, because I was always so fascinated by it, you know, um, it felt really weird to like being exposed to it um, in a negative way, like it was clearly because it's pretty obvious. I mean, some other people have showed or have told me their experiences, and it's like, yeah, they're receiving a message from an ancestor or like another spirit. But it doesn't feel them, it doesn't make them feel at ease, at unease, it's like it was definitely uh, um, a funny a funny experience. It lasted for like about a week. But I remember I was sleep deprived because I couldn't sleep. I felt that if I would fall asleep, you know. So there I was sleeping in my tiny bed for one with my friend because she was just like, you cannot leave me alone. This ghost is after me.
it's
So
it's funny too. I wonder if looking back you can remember or recall the the if you had a sense of intuitive levels that maybe all of those around you in your dorm they maybe were tapped into, or if maybe inherently you were more tapped into that side of things at that time than anyone else in your dorm. And therefore I know a lot of times we uh there's like I have a shamanic healer that I see, and she talks about a near death experience, and some other people have also referenced something similar to almost like where if you're psychic and if you have these abilities that you're locked into, or you've accepted and are working, um, it's almost like a ghost or spirits on the other side. It's like they see a light on in the house that is
mhm,
you on the other side, right? So there's like a window, there's an opening. Oh, that one's on. I can go to that one and talk to whoever's it there, and all the other people who aren't yet awakened to it, their lights are out. So so they don't go and try to contact. And if this entity is looking to, if it's feeding off the negative energy, if it's feeding off the fear, because that's a pretty intense energy, fear. So
totally. Yeah,
so maybe it's like, oh, she's she's got her light on whether she realizes it or not, so I'm going over there because this is where I can get the reaction I'm looking for.
totally. I mean, I've always considered myself, that like I guess that's why I'm an astrologer too, because people vibe something around me and they just tell me very, very personal things, or it's happened to me that as literally a stranger or the tour guide, I just had this experience on like a tour guide. I was on a tour here in Colombia and the tour guide is like, you know what? I've never said this to anyone, but here it is. Like out of nowhere. And it's pretty funny because my husband's there, right? While he's doing that. And he's like, see, this is exactly what happens. It's something about me in which people or spirits or energy just feels comfortable, kind of like um by expressing itself, and it can be a good thing or a bad thing. But now that I'm a little bit more in control of my energy and my boundaries and what I let in, you know, In the past, I feel like I put myself in situations in which I didn't listen to my intuition, and then I was, a little bit in trouble in the sense of like my energy is being taken away, or I've literally felt like people stealing my energy from my solar plexus in the past. So getting a hold of that is has been very good now, but I felt like I did have to go through certain experiences to like learn that that I'm a weirdo, that I need to operate from a perspective in which like I'm shielding myself, and also the people I relate to, because it goes along with that as well.
I feel like you've touched on the number one question people usually ask when they are awakening and really tapping into all of their powers and their deep empathic abilities and their intuition. And that's, how do I protect myself? How do I get grounded? How do I bubble up? How do I set these energetic boundaries? Because now that I'm really aware of it, I realize this has been going on so many times. Like people be like, I sit on a plane and the person next to me always talks to me and then tells me all of the worst things that's happened to them. Like, how can I just not have that happen every time I get on an airplane or I'm on a bus or something like that? Um, and like you said, like you mentioned going to how you went to school, and one of the main reasons was to learn this protection and to understand this energy and be able to do that. I think that's probably with the growing consciousness, because I think in the last, especially in the last 5 years, it's really been an explosion, and it's been quite something to be witness to, for sure. Because I mean, whether it's the paranormal world or whether it's the occult world, the esoteric world, the conspiracy world, the psychic world, all these different, like all of these roads kind of led to the same place, and like this giant community kind of is starting to trying to figure out how do we interact with each other, right? Because we've all been kind of on the fringe in some kind of way, and we all ended up in the same spot. And there's I do believe that we are on that road to consciousness growing and expanding, and more people opening up. And there's going to be clearly, as we've already seen, there's going to be some major bumps along the way. Um, some serious
Right,
growing pains.
right. Because like when there's so much consciousness, usually you, astrologers, we study that according to like what are the planets doing? It's Neptune in Pisces in this case, because Neptune is the planet that rules psychic powers and mysticism and ghosts and all that. It's very strong right now, and it will be strong for a few years. But you see the good side of Neptune and the bad side of Neptune. You see both. You get both, at a collective level. So that's also, mysticism and like all this is it's waking up. But then you also have gurus and conspiracy theories and like fake gurus. What I meant, no, fake gurus, conspiracy theories, and all that. So it's like learning how to balance that, as well, because like um, you get both manifestations of the energy, you know.
Yeah, and it's, well, I mean, it has played itself out in the United States so hardcore, especially
Mhm.
with the QAnon conspiracy theory and everything that happened with this last election. It's like so intense. It almost seems like it's out of a movie, a lot of it. Um, but we're used to things that seem like they're only out of movies
Yeah.
happening in our lives. And I think the rest of the world is kind of waking up to like, oh, there's a lot of stuff that we didn't realize that was real, that is real. I mean, I can't believe we're already at like over 45 minutes here. I do want to touch
Oh wow.
on the because I realize I literally have zero background information on on the shapeshifter
Mhm.
experience that you've had. And you know I mean, I guess I could even argue that I started this podcast over 7 years ago, whenever it was, trying to find other people who had either experienced shape shifting, or people who themselves are, experiencing the actual shape shifting to themselves, let alone other people who have witnessed it happen with someone else. because I do feel like that's got to be a pretty lonely world for people who are experiencing shapeshifting and don't have any idea why, how, or what, or they don't. Because I remember it was a crazy journey to try to find any information at the time. I had witnessed it, and we were looking for answers, and there was just answers nowhere at that time because the internet hadn't become the internet yet, really, at that time. But and even still today, there's not a ton of information out there on shapeshifting and shapeshifters. But so I am very curious to hear the details of this experience that you've had.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, like you said, you don't hear about it a lot. Like you hear about ghosts or aliens or like witches or whatever, you know. I did, as I was telling you, since I was in my teenage years, of course, I was like super interested in, in all of this. So I'm sure you've heard of Carlos Castañeda. Have you
Yes.
heard of him? So I read a couple of his books, on shape shifting and how like how I mean, this was a long time ago, but I've been exposed to that. That was the only time that I've actually thought about shape shifting. Um, what's funny is that, and I am actually having a very talented writer who chases paranormal experiences. She's an amazing astrologer as well. I'm having her write an article about this because, I mean, I always seen her on her Instagram. She's like chasing aliens and all that. And I expressed to her that the two kind of like mind blowing experiences I've had, uh, one of them is the shape shifting, both happened in an eclipse. So it wasn't, so the time that I saw the shapeshifter obviously wasn't planned, but I am a huge fanatic of like also astronomy, not just astrology. I'm not an astronomer yet, but I also feel like it goes along with astrology really well. And they were born together. They got separated, but they were born together. And so these past eclipse season that we just went through, it was impossible for me to take time off. But usually I take time off during eclipses just so I can experience them. I travel to see eclipses. I have a group of friends and we call each other hashtag eclipse chasers and we think we're so cool, because we love we love that experience of like visualizing. And ancient astrologers really believe that the physical connection to these events is really important, right? So this eclipse was not any eclipse. It was a very important one. And I looked at my notes because it's very clear to me how why it happened on that day. You know, very important things were happening on that day. So the day I saw this shapeshifter was on June 20th of 2020. It was exactly on the summer solstice. It was a new moon eclipse and Mercury was retrograde.
So this was just last year. This was about a
Yeah.
year ago.
Mhm.
Just under a year ago right now.
Exactly, because we're coming on to the summer solstice again, which is this weekend. So for me, that's like a big deal because like in astrology, when you have so many important events happening in one, it just makes sense that the energy is just incredibly powerful. Also, eclipses are portals. In astrology, we always say eclipses are portals of time. It's like they bring on the type of energy that's just very, very wobbly and funny and weird. And like, if you notice, you always feel weird in eclipse season, you and everyone else. It affects everybody. Not in a bad way, by the way. Certain things like manifest in a good way, but eclipses are always super powerful. Lunations, the luminaries, the sun and the moon, they align. And also in astrology, Mercury is the shapeshifter, right? Mercury is that planet that can just, it's super versatile, you know, it's like the ruler of Gemini. So just think about how Geminis like are super versatile. So in astrology, Mercury is always called the trickster, the shapeshifter, the swift kind of like planet that just loves to, um, it can become anything. So anyway, that's the astrology behind it. But I wasn't trying to see a shapeshifter. Um, I I it was like after COVID, after everyone's been kind of cooped up, you know, and my husband and I went to Arcata. So it's like a town around, like it has a beach. It's like in the port between California and Portland, so it's pretty far.
I'm actually going to be up there. There's a comedy club. I've been to Arcata, and it's a very beautiful Northern California little town. It's There's a comedy club up there, Savage Henry Comedy Club. I'll be at in September. I performed there once before or twice before. It's There's like the redwoods up there, and like
Mm,
there's a vibe up there that is like things happen up in this place.
totally. I mean, this is one of those places, you know, that are all over the world that are like known for being really energetically charged, you
Yeah,
know.
for sure.
And so we went and we had gotten some food to pick up, and we had a bottle of rosé, you know, and we sat that 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 night to like um to watch the sunset, you know, to like be out. Like I really like being in nature when these events happen, because like I feel the energy, you know, it makes me feel, you know, I just feel it. So there we were, you know, and there were some people there. Um, and so the funny thing is that we were sitting on the beach and my husband got up. This is going to sound funny, but he went to pee by the rocks, right? So he kind of left me alone for like a few minutes. And then I turned my head to the left and I see this guy. And it kind of startled me because the way that the beach is, he could have not come from the rocks in my brain, right? Like he had to, I should have been able to see him walk towards me. So I got a little like, who's this person? And then my husband also saw him while he was peeing in the rocks, and like he focused his sight on me because he was worried that he would be coming to me. You know, like I'm just telling, like saying, like this person coming out of nowhere, um, not walking the path, the normal path, that because you couldn't come into the beach any other way. So he literally came out of the rocks. And so I fixated on him because I was like, you know, what is he up to? What's going on? Like it was a very charged moment. He was dressed in black. Um, and I remember his face perfectly because I just kind of like followed him with my eye. You know, I didn't stop seeing him. I felt like there was something going on. And my husband too. So this guy seems like he's walking towards me, but then turns around, keeps walking to the beach, goes into the water, goes into a wave, and the wave turns into his face because like he had a very particular face. And so the wave just turns into his face, and I'm like looking for him. He's gone. And the wave turns into a dog. And the dog it was kind of like yellow, brown, and the dog comes out of the water walking around. And so I kind of like I froze, and I just heard my husband going like he has this like nervous laugh, right? That he only expresses when he's nervous. So I heard him going like like kind of like nervous. And I said to him, I asked him, I was like, did you see that? He goes, yeah, how could you not see that? I was like, what happened? And he was like, that was insane. And I was like, so you saw it too? He's like, totally, because I was worried that he was heading towards you. So we both fixated on this person. And it was really funny because there were other people there and they didn't seem to care or have noticed. And I just, to be honest, it was pretty shocking to me. Like, I've never seen anything like that before. And the guy, he was gone. He wasn't in the water or anything. Like, he became this dog. He used the water to shapeshift into an animal. And like, we both saw it. And it was funny because we weren't together at the time, but he was like you know, like a couple meters away. But my mind tried to tell me that it didn't happen. Like that whole night, which by the way ended up being a beautiful night. And I realized, it's an eclipse, it's Mercury retrograde, it's like summer solstice. Like, this guy picked this day, and I felt like he picked us to see him. Like, it was pretty obvious where we're going to. He's like, he was pretty close to me, like when he turned into the water. And the entire night, I was in shock for the rest of that day, because I reminded me of Carlos Castaneda's books, but I've never even like thought about the concept again, or I've never like seen anything like that. And it just seemed extremely powerful. And this time, now relating to like my other story that I told you about the ghost, I wasn't scared or anything. It actually seemed like a good omen to me. It just felt very natural, even though it wasn't. So it felt like, I just felt like he wanted us to see him. Like, it was pretty obvious to me. It's like the way it happened and everything. So there's your story.
Wow. I mean, and it's just like, where'd the dog go? And and how long was he a dog, and or how long was the dog a person, and or or like how many other things could it be? I mean, there's just a million questions. It's interesting, really fascinating about all the different energetic things happening simultaneously here too. And this is the first time now, granted, I haven't heard a lot of these stories, and there's only, a few people I've talked to who have had experiences with what they classify as a shapeshifter. And the interesting thing that stands out about this one too is, amongst everything else, other than a man turning into a dog, is using water as an agent of change. That sounds like by the way you're describing it.
Well, I mean, I practice astrological magic, and like I mean, I know it's not the same, but in astrological magic, you need the four elements. Like, when you're going to cast a spell or when you're going to manifest, you need fire, you need water, you need air, and you need earth. So I don't know how he incorporated the fire in this case, but the water was there, the earth was there, the air was there. So
Well, I mean, I guess in some way the sun and the moon, like the eclipse, the new moon eclipse, does that not play into the sun at all? Um,
yeah, I mean, Cancer is a water sign, so that
yeah.
like kind of relates. I would need to see where Mercury was, if it was probably retrograde in a fire sign, that could be. Um, I mean, from what I've thought about it and like kind of gather my thoughts, this is a very special moment in time, like according to Carlos Castaneda, these people, I mean, I know that you dated someone and that was a different story, but like, let's say I'm going to decide that I want to be a shapeshifter. That would be a life learning for me. I would have to like study with a shaman, do all this work, not live a regular life from the shapeshifting that I know that from these
Yeah.
books. And then you need the perfect weather, just like when you need the sun to go to the beach, you would need the perfect astro weather to do something like that. Like when I cast spells, I literally wait until a planet is doing something, you know, like it's not like, oh, I'm just going to go and cast a spell. I'm like, I'm going to wait for Venus to be here or Jupiter to be here. Like sometimes that takes months, you know, depending on what you're trying to manifest. But like from what I know of, like when you can create something of that magnitude, um, I feel like it makes so much sense. It wasn't a coincidence that he picked one of the most astrologically charged days to do this. It just doesn't seem like a coincidence to me.
Yeah, no, it doesn't to me either. The First of all, it's one of the most profound things I think that, at least in the world of, all these things are transformative, and and they really can spark like a sense of awe and wonder. I think even those of us who are all in on the belief side of these things, the possibility of these things being real, which we believe they are, that doesn't mean that when certain things happen, we're not blown away by it, right? It's
Yeah,
still mesmerizing, and I think the old saying, well, all the planets were aligned. It's like a casual saying, meaning like everything had to go right. Well, all the planets were aligned. I mean, these sayings, they come from places, right? They're not just made up.
totally, totally. I mean, the planets were aligned, and it's funny because like media, you know, and I work in media, and I will say this: the media has demonized Mercury retrograde, but in ancient astrologers, they believed that Mercury retrograde is an alchemical aspect. It's totally alchemical. That's why they worked with it in a completely different way. And that's what I teach my clients, you know. Mercury retrograde is not here to ruin your high, you know. Sure, if you're like, we're so technology like, you know, focused in this time, but ancient astrologers waited to do things during Mercury retrograde, waited to do things during Venus retrograde. Like they had a very deep knowledge of these transits. They were like very important points in time in which they did certain things. Like,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, for example, the Mayans always used Venus retrograde. They knew, they didn't have telescopes, but they totally knew the Venus cycles, and they used it to, this is going to sound crazy, but they used it to invade other other city, I mean other towns, you know. It's there's just this huge misconception that retrograde is like a bad thing. It's the total opposite. It's like an alchemical force that we can use, because just because they're like forcing us to think differently, you know. But I mean, for me, I use the Mercury retrogrades, and they do have alchemical elements to them, you know. So if you go through, um, there's a whole branch of astrology that is based on Mercury, because Mercury was the magician, you know,
Oh, wow.
in a, yeah. So see, there's like a pretty big story here. So I was actually pretty bummed out that I couldn't be out there in nature this eclipse season, because I felt like I would have been exposed to something again. Because when your mind is open like that, you know, already, like you said, you're attracting more of those experiences. Um, but it was impossible for me to get away this time.
No, I mean, I feel like there's a lot more to talk about, and maybe in the future we'll revisit and have some more chats. I mean, I think the listeners would love that, and it's been really enjoyable to hear some of your story here, and thank you for sharing all of this with us. The
Of course.
Wow, I mean, this is like of all the shapeshifter stories I've been, lucky enough to hear, this is definitely the one. This one is in the nature of it is different as far as like transforming into like from human to animal. Um, is definitely different than some of the other ones. Like that was not an aspect of my experience, or there's at least one other person who I've talked to on the show who that's it's not really their that wasn't the nature of theirs either. But that's really, really fascinating. And I mean, and that harkens back into like, there's so much folklore and mythology around that, like whether it's, like, the werewolf stories and all these other things. But, which, obviously it ties into the full moon and, so like, so where are
Totally.
these stories coming from? Were they made up or were they pulled from actual events happening? And then over time, people just believe they became stories that people would tell that had maybe morality lessons. Um, I think we're probably of the belief that they're based on based on things that are actually happening as opposed to vice versa. But um, this has been real cool. Let's tell everybody where they can find you on social media and elsewhere.
Yeah, totally. I am on Instagram as Naramon Artstrology. And I am on my website. It's naramon.com. And for anyone that's interested in like taking a deeper dive, like farther than their sun sign, my book is coming out in October. So it's kind of already on pre-sale, but I'm not promoting it fully yet. But it's coming out in October and it's going to be everywhere, like on Amazon. It's already on Amazon, on Target, Barnes and Noble. So I'm pretty excited about that book because I'm my first language is Spanish, so I never really thought I was going to write a book in English, but here I am, and yeah, life is moving pretty fast. And yeah, I think just my website and on my Instagram, you can find me. And thank you so much for having me. I get interviewed all the time, but I've never been on a paranormal podcast. So that's so cool. I want to find out about the other shapeshifter stories because now that I've been exposed to it, it's just so like mind blowing.
Yeah, it really cracks you open as far as I mean, you were talking about Arcata too, and Arcata is not far at all, actually, and it's part of the same area of the original, or not the original, but the most famous Bigfoot footage, the Patterson Gimlin
Oh,
film, which
yeah.
everyone has seen. It's in Willow Creek, which is right there by Arcata. That's Bigfoot
Yeah.
country up there as well, and I'm of the belief that Bigfoot is, you know, related to the paranormal with like interdimensional portals and all kinds of things. Like, I'm kind of in that school of thought when it comes to like the Bigfoot phenomena. But all of this stuff is interlaced and connected in some way, and it's really fascinating and fun. I mean, I envision a future where there's a Bigfoot getting their chart done. Like that would be a fun that'd be a fun thing. But Nariana, thank you so much for jumping on. Really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to chat with you.
Course. Yeah,
And
thank you so much for having me.
of
This is
course,
super fascinating.
and when the book comes out or it's like a proper pre-sale and you really want to push it, make sure you let us know over here and we'll remind people that they can find it
Of
and,
course.
go
Yeah,
get it.
thank you so much. And I appreciate being here. Super, super interesting.
Yeah, this was great. This is great.
Take